The Energy Department has now joined the FBI, concluding that the COVID-19 pandemic, more likely than not, originated from a lab leak, a notion characterized at one point as a fringe conspiracy, deemed by some even as racist, when the Trump administration began giving the lab leak theory credibility at the beginning of the pandemic. Joining me now, former Trump Secretary of State and author of Never Give It an Inch, Mike Pompeo. Good to have you back, Secretary.
Good morning, Shannon. It's great to be with you.
Okay, your book, you talk about this quite a bit because you were an early adopter of the possibility that this could have been a leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And you said you weren't surprised that the Chinese pushed back on it, and some of your opponents on the left politically did too, but you were surprised that some U.S. scientists were. You mentioned Drs. Fauci and Collins specifically and say this: I think they were fearful of being exposed for gargantuan conflicts of interest and activities that sidestepped American laws. What exactly did you mean?
Well, Shannon, we now know that there was U.S. money funding the research that was taking place inside that laboratory, and I think Dr. Fauci and Peter Daszak knew that, and so they went full battle stations in March. Now, goodness, 3 years ago, think about that. 3 years ago, I was on Good Morning America, this week on ABC, and said, hey, I think this looks like it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and they went full battle stations. I think they were fearful that the facts that we now know would be true, that they would have had some complicity in what took place there. I don't think we know the full scope. The Chinese Communist Party has torn up all the documents, thrown away the journalists. They've made it all go away. But it is now good to see that the Department of Energy has come to the same conclusion that I did, my State Department did years ago, that this leak came from a laboratory in China, and then Xi Jinping foisted this virus upon the world.
We may not know on the Chinese side, but are you optimistic we will know on the U.S. side? Are part of the equation in this? And should there be responsibility? Who should be held responsible?
Yes, we should hold all parties accountable for this, Shannon. Everyone who had a role. Look, make no mistake, this is a Chinese virus that came from their laboratory. There's no mistaking that. But we should make sure we understand fully what the U.S. role in this. If there were laws that were violated by any senior American officials, they should be held accountable too. We had millions of people die around the world, Shannon. We've had billions of dollars worth of economic harm inflicted on the U.S. economy. The only way to get this right for the American people is to make sure that everyone connected to this is held accountable.
Okay, I want to turn to Russia and Ukraine, but first this. You have been criticized for calling Vladimir Putin things like talented, savvy, elegantly sophisticated, not reckless, always does the math, and that you have enormous respect for him. You know you've been criticized for that. Is there context to that? How do you explain those very flattering descriptions?
Yes, those are what I was taught at West Point. Always respect your adversary. Don't call ISIS the JV, right? This is what Barack Obama did. Don't underestimate Vladimir Putin. That's what the Biden administration did. It's how we ended up not being able to deter him from attacking Ukraine. When you think of your enemy as weak or dumb or not capable of executing things that can harm your country, you put American lives at risk. And so when I used those words, I was serious about them. This is a guy who made a huge strategic blunder, but even today, Shannon, even today, we should not underestimate his tenacity, his capabilities, the willingness of the Russian people to continue to impose enormous harm on Ukrainian civilians and to upset the space here in the global order. Vladimir Putin should still not be underestimated. He's threatened all kinds of things. We should be sure that we're doing the right things to deter this adversary who wants to do the American people harm.
So to be clear, though, on a scale of morality, where would you place him?
A 0.
Okay. Very good.
Assuming 1 is the lowest. Yes, 0. Shannon.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about what's going on in Ukraine, because there is a lot of speculation. There's a bit of a split within the GOP, folks who are on the Hill now, folks who are running for president, who may want to run for president. Here is what former President Trump said last night about us spending tax dollars overseas.
Instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars to defend the borders of distant foreign countries, under my leadership, we will defend our borders first.
Okay, as we talked about with Senator Warner, there is some flagging of support in Ukraine. People know we don't have our own fiscal house in order here. We may face other threats around the globe that will require our resources. They're genuine competing needs. So how do we make that assessment?
Shannon, there certainly are competing needs. But America can do this all right if we get lots of things right. Let's talk through three things that are buried in what you asked. First, yes, we should secure our southern border. I was involved in that. We built Remain in Mexico. We'd actually had sovereignty for the United States of America. I'm proud of the work we did in the Trump administration to make sure that our southern border was secure. It is possible to do. We simultaneously made sure that Vladimir Putin didn't invade Europe and had deterred that kind of aggressive attack on Europe. It happened for 4 years on our watch. We didn't allow Vladimir Putin to take an inch of Europe. And finally, as for the fiscal house in order, the 4 years the Trump administration spent $6 trillion more than it took in, adding to the deficit. I came to Congress, Shannon, you'll remember this, in 2011 as part of the Tea Party class. We were determined to get America's fiscal house in order, and it's going to take serious American leadership to do it. But I'm confident, Shannon, we can do each of those three things. America will get there. We just need serious leadership that's prepared to actually speak honestly with the American people about each of those.
Would a President Pompeo do a better job at managing the deficit and debt than a President Trump did?
I think a President Pompeo or any conservative president will do better than not only we did during the 4 years of the Trump administration, but Barack Obama, George Bush. The list is long, Shannon, of folks who come to Washington on one theory and aren't prepared to stand up and explain to the American people how we're actually going to get that right. It matters to the next generation. The system is at risk. If we don't get it right, we are $31 trillion in the hole. We've got to begin to grow the economy, build it back with lower taxes. And when we do that and grow our economy, we'll get it back right. It's going to take a true conservative leader, Shannon.
Are you saying that President Trump wasn't a true conservative leader?
$6 trillion more in debt. That's never the right direction for the country, Shannon.
Okay, I want to hit on Iran. As I talked about with Senator Warner, it seems to be flying under the radar just a bit, this nuclear advancement that has been assessed this week. Your critics say this: the scope of Trump's failed Iran policy comes into sharper focus. They say this lies at your feet. As Iran's nuclear program advances, it's important to understand just how spectacularly Donald Trump's policy failed and in turn created the current mess. You were Secretary of State when he pulled out of the Iran nuke deal. Do you accept any of the blame for where they are now?
Hey, Shannon, they blamed Afghanistan on us. They blamed the China problem on us. Eventually, the Biden administration will take responsibility for something. Now, I guess 2 years in, right? No, our policy on Iran was fundamentally right. This administration has walked away from the nation of Israel. The Israeli leadership doesn't have the confidence to do what it may need to do to keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon, that America will be with it in its time of need. We had isolated Iran. We built out the Abraham Accords because we sanctioned the Iranian regime. We made life difficult for them. We took away their money. They went from $96 billion down to $4 billion worth of foreign exchange reserves. Hezbollah soldiers were getting paid less, Shannon. We had the right policy with respect to Iran. We had begun to put them in a box where they would have had to make difficult decisions. And I can say this: the Israelis knew that. The Gulf Arab states knew that. And I think the American people understood that our relationship with Iran can't be one of coziness. We can't negotiate with them while they're trying to kill Americans. Those are the wrong policies with respect to the United States and Iran. We have to get this right, and the Biden administration has failed miserably.
Well, they've been ticking forward on that program, so we'll continue to track that. I want to give you a chance to respond to what Senator Warner said about the Havana syndrome, this assessment from the intel agencies. It wasn't a weapon or something that was done by a foreign adversary. He said you guys tried to sweep it under the rug, didn't take it seriously, didn't send investigative teams.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in that because Senator Warner knows better than that. He was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee when I was the CIA director. We were the ones who identified this problem. We were the ones who got our officers, broadly speaking, both State Department and CIA, out of the dangerous places that they were in. And then we began a massive effort to try to identify what happened. It's proven very complex. It's now 5 years on. Still not clear precisely how it is these folks became sick and injured. We ought to keep at it, but to make this about partisanship or suggest that somehow our administration didn't either help the folks who were injured, we did, we provided them medical attention, or do our best to figure out how to deter it and push back against it. That's just, I wish Senator Warner hadn't done that. That's beneath him.
Okay, last time you were here, I asked you whether you were going to run for president in 2024. You said you'd get back to me. I have not heard from you, so we are still waiting any announcements on that front. But you were at CPAC and had a very pointed speech there, hit a number of top issues that sound like somebody who could be giving a stump speech. I want to play a little bit of what you said Friday night.
We can't become the left, following celebrity leaders with their own brand of identity politics, those with fragile egos who refuse to acknowledge reality.
Washington Post assessed it this way. It says, in case it isn't obvious, Pompeo is talking about his former boss, Donald Trump. Pompeo avoids naming names so he can have plausible deniability and potentially avoid a backlash. So celebrity leaders with fragile egos, who were you talking about?
Oh, Shannon, I was talking to the American people. I was talking to the American people about the seriousness of the moment that we find ourselves in. We've been focused on foreign policy today, but Shannon, you and I have talked about the problems in our schools. We've talked about crime in the streets. We spoke for a moment about our southern border. No, I was talking about the time to elect serious leaders who are thoughtful, who speak about America as the most exceptional nation in the history of civilization. They're not denigrating it. They're not throwing out whoppers. They're not spending all their time thinking about Twitter. That's what I was speaking to. It's the moment for celebrity, the moment for stars is not with us. It's the moment for America to go back to its conservative founding, its conservative ideas, and I am very confident that room cheered that idea, and I'm very confident that we're headed back that direction.
Okay, celebrity leaders with fragile egos, big voices, people obsessed with Twitter. You leave us with no other assumption in that you are talking about your former boss and that you may be considering a serious run yourself. I mean, who else are you talking about?
No, Shannon, I'm not talking about I'm talking about what's happening in states and counties, school boards all across America. It is time for a thoughtfulness and a weightiness and a seriousness that I think we've kind of moved away from, and we got to get back there. It's not about President Trump or former President Trump. It's not about President Biden. It's about the American people and getting this right. And, you know, I'm not dodging your question either. We are working our way through. Susan, my wife Susan, and I are working our way through trying to figure out what's next for us. And in very short order, we'll have figured that out, and we'll let everyone know, Shannon.
What does short order mean? Got a timeline?
Not a hard one, but next couple months.
Okay, we'll see you back here on Fox News Sunday for your announcement, Secretary.
All right, Shannon. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
day.
You too.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.